Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. I'm honored to be here. In the next 20 minutes, I will talk about the Corona crisis, what the impact will be on economics and organizations based on my book, Exponential Organizations. So let's start quickly. I believe we are moving into the age of consciousness after the age of intelligence, artificial intelligence. There's a great book. Maybe you have heard about this book. It's called The Fourth Turning, William Strauss. It's an amazing book. It predicted the current situation 25 years ago, so it's pretty important. And maybe you have seen the movie called Snowpiercer 6 years ago. It's pretty much in line with the pandemic right now and what's going on, so I highly recommend it. Anyway, so let's go back, and what I believe is that we will see the resurgence of ancient cultures. It means there will be more focus on meditation because of the crisis, Corona crisis, tribes, human and connection. We move from me to we, for individual to collective. We move back to nature, more about universal connections, and we are building regenerative cultures. And that's all a result of the current crisis. I also believe that we will move into more long-term societal programs, just like in 1933 with the Green Deal, Roosevelt, and after the Second World War. So that's very promising. That's a good outlook. Short term, I'm a bit more concerned. I expect the pandemic to take around 2 years, and then we have a vaccine with the distribution implemented in different waves. And economically, it will take probably 3 to 5 years. We move to an economic recession, depression, just like 1929, in my view. The virus was the trigger. Well, the problem is not the virus. The problem is too much debt in the economy in the last 10 years, right? We put too much money. So we have to deleverage the economy. And that's what's going on in the next few years. And this will be a big rehearsal for the climate crisis that comes after this crisis, right? The next 10 years and maybe probably a bit longer. So expect unemployment rates like between 10 and 25%. In the US, it's already pretty scary. It will be solved long term, but you go into a deep crisis. There will be many economic domino effects, in my view, with global supply chains, just in time, a lot of leveraged organizations, they will go bankrupt. There will be supply shortages, demand shortage because of the crisis. So this will have a significant impact on the whole economy. We will move to a more self-sufficient and self-sustainable, decentralized, relocalized economy. So we will produce more stuff in-house, in our own country or region. That's an interesting development. I also believe the capitalistic system itself will be modernized. There's also a cover story by Financial Times last few weeks. It's a big deal going on. You can also see it in the long-term stock exchange by Eric Ries in the US and Silicon Valley. Even Ray Dalio and Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, are saying this. So the capitalistic system will become more social and ecological. That's a good thing. We will see massive bankruptcies, also with freelancers, small, medium-sized companies, also some corporates, but they are hit to a lesser degree. There will be a massive retraining. I'm also doing this myself in Holland for the last 3 years. We are retraining 1 million people in the next 10 years. They have to move into healthcare, education, technology jobs, IT, AI, of course. So you can imagine the government itself. So these will be booming markets, and a lot of people need to be re-educated towards these sectors. There's also a shift towards more developed countries. They are in a better position to benefit from crisis. Why? They have less debt. They have dollar position. They have a better immune system to deal with crises like the pandemic right now, and they have more slack to absorb the crisis relative to developing countries, on average, I have to say. Then the impact on technology, what I expect, I see a speed up of digital transformation projects, programs in Europe and the US. So digitization becomes sped up. We also see more geopolitical tensions because of technology between China and the US. This will accelerate because the power structure will move away from the US more to China. I think that's inevitable. You will also see the convergence of emerging key technologies like quantum computing, blockchain, and AI because of the crisis. It will accelerate to lower costs and is more sustainable and more impactful, more effective. We will also see that Amazon becomes a healthcare company increasingly. It's already a healthcare insurance company, but it becomes a full health company with Alexa, for example. They have all the data points of their e-commerce operations. And Apple becomes more like an educational company. They will align with MIT. So expect a lot of changes there as well. Of course, digitization will accelerate. Remote working, more e-commerce, more remote learning, remote conferences. This will stay after the crisis to a lesser degree, but still it will be significant. The impact on organizations, in my view, think about my book, Exponential Organizations, will be significant. Today, around 80% on average of the market cap of large organizations is determined by immaterial value, not material value. And this is increasing. What that means that we talk about purpose-driven organizations within exponential organizations. This will accelerate. In the last, let's say 8 years, the amount of purpose-driven organizations have increased from 1% in 2012 to now almost 10% installed base of all organizations globally, doubling every 2 years. And I think the crisis right now will accelerate. So I do believe that in the next 10 years, if you have an organization and you are not fully authentic, purpose-driven by most or all employees, you will be in trouble. It will be very hard to acquire the best employees, partners, and customers. They will leave you faster after the Corona crisis if you don't have a real authentic purpose. So I see a big shift there also, supported by research by Financial Times last week, by Paul Polman, for example, the ex-CEO of Unilever. There's an acceleration right now towards purpose-driven organizations and less about shareholder value, even though most organizations have to survive. So they will focus short-term on financial KPIs, but midterm, long-term, it will become more focused on purpose. How are you creating a better world with your organization? And there's also shifts, what I see based in China. And by the way, China is #1 today in most exponential technologies, organizational innovation, and leadership. In China, they have created an ecosystem of corporate startups, universities, the government, to address one particular purpose. Let's say water scarcity, or maybe it's social cohesion or lack thereof. And these organizations, they work together based on a collective purpose and less about self-interest. To give you one example, Alibaba and JD, big e-commerce players in China and the world, they have hired like 50 to 100,000 employees who became unemployed because of the crisis, the Corona crisis. Why? Because it's societally good, right? They do it from inside out, not because the government says that, but they want to do it to do good, right? So that becomes more normal. You also see it in the Western world a little bit, collective MTP programs or collective purpose programs, but it's still early days. And I think that will change. More organizations, corporates will align with their competitors and startups to help solve climate crisis, biodiversity, water scarcity in the next few years. So that's a very positive development. But I also see there's more bolder, more significant move to radical ecological and social inclusiveness. We see that, let's say, in the last 40 years, starting in the early 80s, the period of 40 years of neoliberalism and me, ego, and money, and that's coming to an end, right? We see the ecological downsides, the social downsides, the inequality rising, the 1%, right, getting too much power and money and wealth, and that's a problem, because it's destabilizing the systems and societies. And the corona crisis makes this more prominent, more significant, more obvious, more explicit. And what we see now globally, and that gives me a lot of hope, that there's a strong groundswell, bottom-up movement, not just young people, millennials or Gen Z, but also top-down. Financial Times, top CEOs, leaders, governmental leaders, that there needs to be a recalibration of the KPI systems of corporates, right? So less towards shareholder value and more about stakeholder management. Everybody needs to win, not just the company or the shareholders, but also the employees, the partners, the customers, society at large, the world. That becomes the default. So you see the same development at the investment side, hedge funds, VCs, or big funds like BlackRock. They also said, okay, if you don't have ESG or diversity policy, ecological, social inclusiveness in your genes as an organization, we won't invest in you any longer, right? This will intensify because of the crisis. Also, what we see that's very hopeful, the ESG VPs in corporations, they are being promoted within the C-suite and even boards at a higher level in the organization to have more budget, more power, more influence, to make stronger decisions in line with ecological and social inclusiveness and also diversity policy. So more women, more ethnicities, more young people in the C-suite and boards. And this will help stabilize the world, which I think is the most important challenge we have in the next decade or two. What we also see that there will be a demand for more transparency, more than even before, more openness about the organization, about metrics, about ESG, so ecological, social inclusiveness, walking the talk, skin in the game, feedback loops. This becomes default also in the financial reporting, including ecological and social KPIs. What we also see is a big shift already today to remote work out of necessity, but this will stick because most employees love it, like me, or employers in my case. So why? It's better for climate, better for work-life balance. It's demonetizing, it's cheaper, less risky, it's safer. Now, many benefits, of course. There are also downsides. What I see happening is that the physical locations or offices, they become social, emotional, spiritual hubs to reconnect with your employees. They become significant, important to when you launch a project and when you finalize it, to celebrate, that you still do in person. And when you have creative, strategic work, you do that in person, because you're more effective in that way. But for all the other stuff, meetings, routine work, whatever, non-brainy, imaginative work, you can do it remotely using online, Zoom, and what have you. And what we see already that in Twitter, they announced that most employees will be able to work remotely, even after the crisis. Facebook today announced that 50% of all their employees will work remotely within the next 10 years. So think about this. Shopify, same storyline. So most Silicon Valley tech platforms, tech startups, they have announced similar initiatives and predictions. So this is here to stay. And the average estimate is that 40% of all workers can work remotely, depending on the vertical market and the particulars of one particular organization. But it means a huge demand drop in office space. This allows us to, let's say, put more nature into cities, for example, which I'm very hopeful about, and that's a necessity. There will also be a different focus on the future of work, right? In Holland, I'm building a movement, as I said before, to reskill a lot of people, 1 million people in the next 10 years. So in the past, people were trained based on knowledge, information, data, and some skills, right? Applicable to one particular machine or application. Increasingly, we move away from that. We move to future-proof, meta skills or competencies. This means there will be more focus within HR and learning education system society on imagination. It's lacking now mostly also in our leaders. True imagination, curiosity, creativity, collaboration, resilience becomes very important. Learning to learn and unlearn. So these competencies become more significant after the crisis. Why? Because the bottom line is that most systems in our society, government, organizations, they have to become more anti-fragile. And anti-fragile means, can you benefit in all scenarios? So can you benefit from chaos, from calamities? Are you resilient, but even beyond resilient, right? So that means, do you have a decentralized organization? Do you have Slack buffers built in your supply chain, in your organization, in your personnel, your employees, right? How fluid, how flexible are you? Principles of simplicity, right? Did you automate a lot of routine-based processes, right? It makes you more anti-fragile, more resilient, to a certain degree, of course. So these are key principles of being anti-fragile that become more important, and they are fully in line with competencies like curiosity, creativity, collaboration. Right? So that's why these competencies become more valuable. The key word here is become more anti-fragile, based on the amazing work of Nassim Taleb, one of my inspirators. And finally, the impact on leadership. Right? After technology and economy and organizations, we see a big shift in leadership. It used to be top-down. Now, in the last 20, 40 years, it became more horizontal leadership. And now it's a combination of both, right? To deal with crisis, you have to be horizontal at first. So open, vulnerable, authentic, purpose-driven, asking a lot of questions, listening to your organization, all the levels of the organization and outside, and building horizontal ecosystems. That's still important, but you also have to move fast. So you have to be top down as well. So very decisive, fast execution. And now we see the best of both worlds emerging, horizontal leadership first, then quickly top-down leadership as the key way to make sense and to act on this new kind of world that's emerging. So post-corona, the economic crisis, depression, also the climate change crisis is coming quickly after that. We also see that leaders today, they are more aligned inside themselves, more self-aware. They are also more systemic, right? I work for the World Economic Forum the last 2 years. There's a big shift now in Davos towards systemic leadership, holistic leadership. So not, let's say, almost left brain in the mind, but also right brain skill sets, also from the heart and from the soul. So the whole human being, the whole leader becomes more important. Systemic leadership, that means holistic, complete solutions to deal with systemic transformation that we are entering in the next 5 years. It's a systemic transformation of the whole world. Then you need holistic answers to holistic problems. And the why of all our systems, all our solutions of the past becomes important. Why do we organize healthcare like this? Why don't we organize it in a different way, right? Reinventing all the components, as we have done to deal with the crisis, right? In Holland, for example, they have implemented in the last few months so many innovations in healthcare. It used to take 10 years. Now it's done in 3 years, right? So that becomes the new normal to a certain degree. Finally, if you want to know more about these topics in more detail, so future of work, organizations, technology, leadership, the age of consciousness that we are entering after this crisis, in my view, please check out Conscious Learning Tribe. We have a weekly free online event on Sunday. It's at noon in Brazil time. It takes 2 hours, so we address all these topics with amazing global thought leaders. It's called the Young Conference. You can check it out. And I hope to see you there. And I wish you a great time today. And thank you for your time and attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuri. It was a great, fantastic, productive speech. I thank you very much because I know it's 1 o'clock in the morning there. So you have done a big effort to be here with us. Thank you very, very much. I hope your book sells crazy, incredibly well here in Brazil. It's already selling like crazy, so more now that you spoke a lot about that. And you know what I like more? When you talk about anti-fragile. That's something I believe a lot and I talk a lot about it. Big kiss to you. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you.
Nice to see you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.